Welcome to my review of Infamous Second Son, developed by Sucker Punch, a game that follows Delsin Rowe, who must save his home from a government-funded agency with his newfound conduit-like powers.
Now look, for all we know, we may be able to pass you through their security, because you're not a normal bioterrorist. You seem to be getting the hang of your, new symptoms.
Right? And of course, the only downside being that, nope, can't think of anything. This is pretty freaking awesome.
Alright, so I'm going to start this review by saying that I did play the first Infamous, however, I never did play the second one, although I do hear it is a great game. And the reason I didn't play the second one was because I kind of actually hated the first one. And the reason why I didn't like it was because I didn't care for the protagonist, I didn't care for the characters, I didn't care for the story. And the gameplay, I thought, was just very frustrating. One of the things I remember really not liking about the first Infamous was that you really couldn't explore the city without being shot at. And I'm one of those people, when you give me a free roaming game, I kind of like to explore a little bit. I like to kind of check out the city, check out the sights and all that stuff. And in the first one, you really kind of couldn't really do that without, I don't know, frustration. And furthermore, within a year where both Prototype and Infamous came out, I have to say that I was much more of a Prototype fan than I ever was an Infamous fan. I just enjoyed the game a lot more. It was a lot more fun, to me at least. So needless to say, I'm just not much of an Infamous fan. However, when I did see the demo for Infamous Second Son, I have to say, it kind of wowed me a little bit. First and foremost, the visuals actually looked quite impressive. The little spiraling little rock thing was something that really stood out to me. It's in the game, it looks just as fantastic as it does in the demo. And just everything, the textures, just looked fantastic. And besides all the things that Sony was saying at the time during E3 and all the things that they were offering to the gamers and everything, Infamous Second Son, just by looking at the demo, was something that made me go, okay, yeah, I want a PS4. So the question is, does Infamous Second Son deliver on everything that it should have delivered on? And in order for you to find out, you're just going to watch the rest of my review. I'm going to talk a little bit about the writing. For the most part, I'd say the writing is actually a major improvement from the first Infamous, because I thought the first Infamous was actually quite poor in terms of writing. Like I said earlier, I didn't like the characters. I didn't care for anything going on in the game. This time I did. I did like the characters. I really liked the protagonist, Delsin. I thought he was very charismatic. I really enjoyed his interactions between his cohorts and especially his brother Reggie. I found him to be very funny. And overall, in terms of writing, I found this game to be a lot of fun. It's just a very fun game, and that's the key word. It's a lot of fun, and plus the story itself isn't actually bad. And another thing I do want to touch on, since I am on the subject of characters and such, is of course Troy Baker, who does the voice of Delsin, doing a very fine job in my personal opinion, because he is one of my favorite voice actors. And if you don't know who Troy Baker is, then you should probably know who he is, because he did do the voice of Joel in, of course, The Last of Us, one of my personal favorite performances ever in a video game, because it's quite phenomenal. But what I really like about Troy Baker here is that he really does bring a lot to offer. He does offer a lot of charisma. He does know how to do comedy very well. And plus, he also brings his face. Essentially, he is kind of playing himself. If you've ever seen any kind of interviews with him, you would probably maybe perhaps say that as well, because he's a pretty funny guy. But enough about all that. Let's talk about the gameplay. And the gameplay, in short, is quite good. First of all, the game looks just as impressive as it did in the E3 demo. It looks really, 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 really good. And the frame rate is, it's a dream. It really is quite impressive given the game's nature. Typically games of this style don't usually look the best. This looks quite stunning. And the game itself is actually a lot of fun. The powers are actually a lot of fun to play around with. You can upgrade them in all kinds of sorts of ways. And furthermore, they just look pretty damn badass, if I might add. Now, there are 4 main powers in the game. One that you get at the very end of the game, which I actually thought was quite odd, which I will talk about in a few minutes. But they're all quite useful, except for really maybe perhaps Smoke, which is the one that you start out with. That was the one I used the very least, was because, well, it's not the most powerful, nor is it really the most cool, I guess. I mean, it's neat, I guess, in a sense. I only used it when the game made me use it, or I really had no other choice but use it because it was the only thing that was available to me at the time. The game does offer side content, albeit some of it is a bit repetitive, because it mainly consists of going to soldier-infested territories and taking them over, and that's essentially it. But what is cool about doing this is that when you do this and you kill the soldiers and all those people or whatever, they stay dead. It's not like the first Infamous where you would kill enemies and then they would respawn back and then they just annoy the living hell out of you. It's not like that here. very thankfully. But there's also some really cool side content though too, like the spray painting missions, which I'll admit I was actually a little cynical and smug towards at first, but after playing it a couple of times, I actually found it to be a ton of fun. So basically, if you've never played Infamous Second Son, I'm just going to kind of break it down for you. You essentially take your controller as you're holding it like this, and then you basically take it with one hand, turn it on its side, and you shake it like a spray can, and then you start to spray. It looks stupid. It sounds stupid, and when I first saw it, I was like, this is stupid. It's just another way for Sony to implement the whole PlayStation Move thing, something that no one's ever going to use. But I'll be honest, after playing it a couple of times, it was one of my favorite things to do in the game, and I'm not kidding. I actually found this to be a lot of fun, and it's not something that's used as a gimmick. It's just something that's there to basically perhaps enrich the experience, just to kind of give the player something to do, which, if that's the case, if that's how Sony's going to implement the move controls and all that stuff, then I'm actually fine with it. And plus, I also want to mention that the controller itself also makes the little spray painting noise, which is kind of cool. Now, I did talk about some of the things that I liked in Infamous Second Son. Now I want to talk about some of the things that I didn't like in Infamous Second Son. And I did already reference that I wasn't the biggest fan of some of its side content. Some of it was a bit repetitive and all that stuff. But what was perhaps the biggest problem for me is that the game at times would be a little too unforgiving. And what I mean is that Delsin's pain resistance was something I found to be a lot left to be desired. And the reason I found this to be a problem was not necessarily because I died a lot, because that wasn't really it. The reason I had this problem is because it just kind of simply took me out of the game. And what I'm talking about is that, okay, when you're fighting people, when you're fighting guys, you're fighting these soldiers, you're taking them all out, you're basically kicking ass with your cool ass powers. Out of nowhere, things get a little too heated. You're getting shot at, and eventually, your health is pretty much going. It happens a lot. The screen goes gray a lot, the sound kind of fades or whatever, and then you basically have to run away from the action for about 10 seconds or sometimes more than that to heal. Then you swoop back in, take too much damage, then you have to do that. It's something that I found to be way too excessive. Now, this could have been a problem because of the way I play. This could have been a problem because it's the game. Soldiers do come at you from all these different directions. They're shooting at you, punching, doing whatever, and it can be a little chaotic. Now, I could see this being a problem if I were playing on some sort of hard difficulty or something like that, but I wasn't. I was playing on normal, and like I said earlier, I didn't necessarily die a whole lot. I mean, I died, obviously, but I didn't die that much to where this was really bothering me. The reason why it bothered me is because it just took me out. I'm supposed to be some sort of superhero, yet I kind of feel like a weakling, if you know what I'm saying. Now, as for another problem I have with this game, and it's a very, very slight one. In fact, I wouldn't even necessarily call this a problem. After you beat the game, you receive a brand new power. However, if you're someone like me who basically did all the side content while you were playing the actual story-based missions, you're pretty much all out of luck because you have nothing else to do with those powers. You can pretty much, yes, of course, you can go fight soldiers and that kind of stuff on the street, that are driving around, but as far as going to the territories and all that stuff, well, you're kind of out of luck. However, I can understand the decision. It just makes sense narratively, but yeah. And now for my last and final gripe, and I would even be reluctant to even call this a gripe because, in fact, this is kind of actually a positive thing, but the game, to me, I felt just wasn't long enough. I did beat it over the weekend, and I did sort of kind of casually play it, but I don't think this is a problem. It's no shorter than every other game out there these days, so it's nothing really worth complaining about. I just thought, this game would have been better if it were longer because, like I said, I enjoyed it quite a bit. Overall, Infamous Second Son might not be the definitive reason to go out and buy a PS4 just yet, but if you already have a PS4, then by all means pick this up because it is well worth your time because I think it's a very, very, very good game. I'm going to give it a very enthusiastic 4 out of 5. As always, I'm Colyn Kirkland, and thank you so much for watching.